Welcome to another episode of Builders, Budgets, and Beers. I'm Reece Barnes, joined with my co-host, Matt Calvano, and our good friend, Shayne Glass from Shrock Companies. Today's episode was a little bit of a bird walk. We initially started wanting to discuss the challenges and nuances that come with tracking project financials amongst multiple different entities, businesses, but it really turned into a conversation more about Shayne's experience with bonds. Not James bonds, not marriage wedding bonds. We're talking construction bonds. Okay. And the importance of how to get into that game. Shayne had mentioned it's really kind of the opportunity to level up your business, level up in the sense of taking on bigger projects, mitigate some of that risk via bond, and what you need to get started, tight financials, building that relationship with the bonding agency, and then ultimately what that does to open doors from a project status standpoint. So if you're a contractor and you're wanting to learn more about bonds, go ahead and check us out. Let's jump into the episode with Shayne. Shayne, thank you for jumping on an episode of Builders, Budgets, and Beers. How are you, sir?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I think for the audience, and just to stay true to the course here, go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and the company that you're working with, or companies, I guess.
Sure. Yep. My name is Shayne Glass. I'm a CPA. We're located in Ohio. I work for a company called Shrock. Shrock Companies is kind of our enterprise, and then we have several entities that are tied to construction rolled up under that umbrella. So we have everything from residential construction to commercial, excavation, residential and commercial. We do some prefab work. We're prefabricating wall panels and kind of ship them all over the U.S. Cold form steel wall panels. We also have a restoration entity where we do water restoration, fire damage, rebuild, stuff like that. So we're kind of in about every kind of construction you could be into. So we have some developments going on as well, where we kind of just build houses and put them up on the market and sell them out. So yeah, we got our hands into a bunch of stuff. So
I love it. Well, and that's perfect because that's what we want to talk about today, is just largely the challenges and nuances of tracking project financials across multiple entities. So just like right out of the gate, a question I have.
Well,
hang on, I'm having a hell of a time with this mic. I
think there's this, and then we have this furnace in the background with
no, it's good. I mean, you know what we need to do? Next time we shoot one of these, we just need to do it from the job site. We need to find a job site.
It sounds like they got the generator running on the job site right now.
Perfect.
This is the challenges of supporting multiple entities. You need a generator to keep your QuickBooks running. You need extra power.
Literally, the computer is smoking. Just make it happen.
Yeah, that's it. The episode's over.
Broadly, Shayne, like, how do you keep it all straight? Like I think you mentioned what? How many different entities there? 6, 7, 8?
Yeah, we have 11 combined. But yeah, so it's a lot. I mean, part of me coming on board at Shrock was Joseph, our owner, had recognized a need. So another interesting, I guess, part of Shrock is we're also Amish owned. So for anybody familiar with the Amish, there's a tremendous history there in craftsmanship and a lot of pride in the work that they do. But also there's a little bit of, how would you say, growth in business is kind of not really the goal culturally. So Joseph was at a spot where he didn't really, he was kind of holding the reins on what we were doing, and he made the decision to let him go. And that was part of my coming on board here. And it was basically, hey, we need to take this thing to another level. So that's where we really started focusing on cost code systems, tracking labor between the companies with intercompany labor, getting our accounting systems, processes up to speed. We have a financial review done for bonding. We're pre-qualified with ODOT, which is Ohio Department of Transportation, for substantial size projects. So there's a lot that goes into it. Having good numbers is very important in construction, and it's actually the hardest thing for a lot of small contractors to hit that next level is they don't have the financial wherewithal to make it happen, especially when it comes to bonding. That's a big deal. So
yeah, can we talk a little bit about bonding actually?
Yeah.
And just for the listeners, in case Matt's audio, the question is can we talk a little about bonding?
My audio,
dude, we're getting just absolutely dunked on with audio.
A bloodbath of audio issues.
Bonding. Let's hear about it, Shayne.
So, what do you guys want to know? Anything specific, or just kind of talk through our process, or?
Well, aside from James Bond, I don't know much about bonding.
Okay, all right.
So what are we talking
bonding?
about?
Yeah, so bonding is basically what's happening is if you have a project that pretty much any public project is going to be requiring bonding of some sort. What that means, public means federal money or state money or some kind of government funding. So what they say, basically what happens is let's say you have a $10 million project and you have contractors bid on the project. Part of that bid process is providing them with a bond. So what that means is if Shrock fails to perform, we get 70% into the project and we realize we're in over our heads and we can't make it happen. The bonding company steps in and will hire someone to complete the project. So they're basically standing behind Shrock. Now, the caveat is the bonding company does not pick contractors that are not very highly, how would you say, respected brand-wise, but also financially stable. So you have to hit a certain level of financial strength for a bonding company to stand behind you and say, hey, we're going to stand behind Shrock. And we believe they're going to do what they say they're going to do, and they have the financial strength to make it happen. So then, usually it'll start with a bid bond. So there's a 10% bid bond requirement. So on that same project, we'd have to get a bond up front. And then in Ohio, every state's different, but in Ohio, you have a bid and performance bond. So we kind of have it as all part of the same process, but you get it up front with the bid. And then all the way through completion, based on the size of the contract, they'll calculate their premium on that. So it could be all the ratings are all over the board, depending on the financial strength of the company. But that's what they make. So it's kind of like insurance. It's not insurance, but it's kind of like that. Standing behind the company to see, it's not like. It's a little different with insurance. You have a claim, something bad happened, you turn it in, whatever. This is, if a company fails on a project, they're basically done. Reputation wise, there's really no coming back from that. So bonding is a big deal. And in order to do bonding, you have to have strong financial information. So we are to the point where, we work with an independent accounting firm that does a financial review. So we have our financials internally done, for the year. Let's say we've been through that process at this point. We're in mid-February. So, but right now it's in their hands where they're going through. It's a little less than I'd say substantially less than an audit. Than a full-blown audit, but it's substantial, and it gets the bonding company to the point where they have a high comfort level with what's being provided. So that's kind of the process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's public. It's got to be happening. It happens for sure on public projects. What about on just general commercial projects?
Yeah, we have one right now. Well, I'm not going to share customer names, but it's a not-for-profit. It's a well-known not-for-profit that you guys would know. And we have a project here locally that we're doing a commercial building for them. And they chose to have bonding. They don't really know us very well, but there was no requirement other than they're huge and it's just part of their process. So they decided that they're going to have bonding. And for us, that's fine. We don't care, but it adds to their project. It's just adds to the cost. So, but yeah, it would be totally optional if someone wanted to do, if an owner wanted to require a bond on a private project.
How often? Like how often? This echo.
So, like, how common is it for like a private project?
Yes.
So it's not super common. I mean, it kind of depends on what kind of customer you're looking for. We're well respected locally, so if people know us, unless there's a public funding requirement that says they have to have a bond, they're really not going to get a bond if we're involved. Really, it would be dealing with an owner that doesn't have history maybe with you, doesn't understand the what we can perform capability wise, size and scope of project wise. So it's not super common. We probably run into a 1 to 2, maybe 3 a year total, I would say.
Okay. Okay. Got it. All right. So mostly on public projects for you, for your company.
Yep.
Okay. And so the financial review. So we were talking about this originally with knowing your numbers is kind of a hurdle for contractors to step into the mid market. Is it fair to say, based on what you just said, that's really only true if customers are trying to get into public projects, or do you also see elements of like bonding and financial reviews in commercial?
That's a good question. I would say bonding is what allows, probably more than any other factor, bonding is what allows a contractor to hit the next level with respect to size and scope of projects. So, because even though it's not a requirement, if someone knows that you can get bonded for a $20 million project, they're going to feel really good about what Shrock can do. And the other thing is the relationship with subcontractors. So that's a big one too. So I would say bonding. I mean, equipment in the excavation world is a huge hurdle for companies, but there's a lot of hurdles, labor, different things. But bonding is a really big one. Having strong numbers, because even if it's not a requirement, it is so easy for me to explain the strength of our company real quick with just what our bonding capacity is. So I can go to a new company that we've never dealt with and we're going to go order pipe from because it's down in southern Ohio, and this actually just happened not long ago, and I just start sharing with them we're pre-qualified up to X million dollars with ODOT, and we're bonding, we're covered on bonded projects up to X amount in aggregate, and there's really nothing else they care about at that point. But we also do have the financial statements we can share with them from the review also.
Okay, got it. So it's kind of like a stamp of approval then.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's not the end all be all, but it is it would be a really big deal to anyone not knowing your company, understanding what your capabilities are as a contractor, I would say.
Okay. And then I'm going to fix my audio here. When it comes to the bonding process, how often are they doing this financial review? Is this just once a year, or is it actually regular at any time they can hop in?
Yeah, so that's a big thing too, the relationship with the bonding company. So pretty much when you get a bonding company, you guys, I mean, you are as close to your bonding, how would you say? I mean, everyone knows how close a marriage is, you become one. I mean, that's kind of like that in the construction world with your bonding company. You're not going to switch your bonding company. You've done a lot of vetting beforehand. So for us, the financial review is done annually, but like right now we have a sizable project that's about 7.5 to 8 million. And we have internal financial statements. Our review's not ready, and the bonding company is good with that. They know I'm a CPA. They know it's very unlikely that there's going to be adjustments to the numbers. So they feel they'll release. They have no problem taking those numbers and working with them. And then if there is a revision, they'll be aware of it and something with the financials. But yeah, so that's we'll get bonds throughout the year, but they do their review process after the financials are released, typically. And then they'll look at, based on the strength of the company, what your capacity can be based on the history of the jobs that you performed over the past year. Has anything really changed? So yeah.
Okay. Cool. Reece, what are you thinking?
I mean, bonding. bonding is it's an interesting topic. I mean, my takeaways so far is, and this is kind of what I wanted to dig back in. We got to call the elephant out of the room here. Do we want to pivot to bonding, or do we want to talk about the challenges and nuances of tracking financials in multiple entities?
I'm just answering questions.
No. I know. And the reason I'm going with this is because I think I think this is an interesting topic, but I bring this up because you'd mentioned that like bonding is like really kind of the next step into growing your business. It's the stamp of the approval. There's a due diligence process. It gives you credibility. It gives you the opportunity to extend yourself into bigger projects and scope, right? It's kind of like having that like big brother there to do it. You mentioned a lot about tracking financials and an audit happening, or at least like a review happening. My question is like, even for the people that aren't dealing with bonds, right? Is it fair to say that'd be like a smaller business, or is it just people that aren't doing public work?
I would say it would be fair to say that it would be a smaller business generally, but not necessarily, because it kind of depends on the type of work they're doing. Like you could have a remodeler, or like I'll use our restoration company, for example. We are the third largest restoration company with the franchise that we're in, Rainbow Restoration, in the entire nation. We're not huge as far as compared to our other companies, but to that industry, we're huge for the size and what we're performing. And so, but we have no bonding requirement in that world. But the size of the project, so really what we're talking about is the size of the project. So we can do a whole bunch of really small projects and gain volume, whereas in Premier, we're not doing tons of volume. Rainbow will do probably 450 to 500 jobs in a year. Premier's probably doing 40 to 50, and I would say the largest of them are going to be anywhere from $4 to $8 million projects. So it's more of a size of project thing, but obviously the bigger projects you do, I would say that's where the bonding comes in, and they're generally going to be larger general contractors at that point.
Okay. So I think that's like kind of a good little segue, going from like bonding and the necessity to get into that level. Obviously it's going to be like, what work are you performing, for what sector are you performing it for, but also like going back into the importance of, we'll call it like being a legitimate company, i.e. having strong financials, tracking financials. Going back to the initial topic, I mean, how do you keep everything straight? Shayne, I mean, you've got all these entities, you've got all these invoices, you've got all these different projects going. Matt, interject if you.
Well, I think it would be interesting, I guess, I guess specifically keeping it straight for these bonding companies. Like, what do you need to present to them, and how often?
So the financial review is really what they go by. But to get to a point where you have an independent accounting firm reviewing your financials and kind of putting their stamp on it, or saying that they're basically what a review is, for someone that doesn't know, is they're basically saying your financial statements are free from material misstatement with respect to GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. And so they'll go through their analytical procedures. They'll go through the whole process, verifying accounts and all this balances, intercompany stuff, all that. And looking at your WIP report, looking at your completed jobs for the year, all that stuff. And so in order to give them what they need, you have to have good systems internally. They can't... you're not going to get the outside, unless you want to spend lots of money. The accounting firm is not going to be doing the internal stuff to the point that it's got to be good enough that they can work with it, I guess is what I'm saying. So, and that's where you got to have a process for payroll, time tracking. How are you tracking time? How are you, because we kind of got two things going on here. We have the external users, which is going to be your bonding companies, your banks, if you have investors, partners, whatever. That's going to be one user. Internally, you're going to have different users, which are mostly going to be your managers, job supervisors, and that's where job costing comes in. So really, you need strength in both. Most importantly, early on, I think, for smaller companies, is getting the job costing part figured out. And if you understand what you're making on jobs, the rest of it will start to make sense, I think, and it will flow into your financials in a way that that is accurate. Because if you're getting your time tracking down, and I think of the inputs. So if you think of really what's in a construction business, what is the cost? It's cost inputs. So you have labor. That's probably the first thing people think of. If you're an excavator, you're going to have equipment. That's going to be a really big line item. You're going to have material, job cost, material that's going to end up on the job. For us, we track things like travel, mileage, labor. We kind of separate out our indirect labor, which would be they're on the job versus some of the indirect stuff, but like mileage, travel, stuff like that. And that's where the inputs come in. So for us, adaptive actually comes in to play with materials, getting the material in, getting the subcontractors in, and knowing that it's cost coded properly, it's going to the right place on the financial statement, chart of accounts, and the next piece is the labor tracking. Really, that's a really big one. Understanding your labor cost and that you don't have time escaping into the void. I don't know, you want to call it the black hole of nothingness. That's a big problem, even for owners if they're a lot of times owners don't track their time appropriately, and they're not quite understanding. It looks like they're making more money than they are, especially on small 3 to 5, 6, people businesses. It's really important to understand the owner's time and putting some kind of fair market value on that. But once you get your systems in place and you can come up with trust, like with adaptive. So for us, trust would be it's consistently entering properly over a prolonged period of time. And so that means it read the image consistently, and it put it to the right cost code, the right GL account. It's mapping properly, which is a setup thing, and it's happening repeatedly. Now you got to understand it well enough to know how it should be mapping and how it should be set up and costing. But yeah, so if you can get those inputs under control and know where and how you're making money, the rest of it just starts to fall into place, I think, from an accounting perspective and a business perspective.
And so job costs, you said this concept of external and internal users, I thought was a nice framing of things, like kind of same concept regardless of how small you are, to your point, right? Like your client would be your external user, right?
Sure.
So regardless, you're going to have those. When it comes to the external user of the bonding company specifically, so are you just giving them audited financial statements, or are you said something about providing a WIP report, and then how regularly are they checking these reports?
Right. So if we did not have a great relationship, if we rewind probably 6-7 years, or not even great, but new relationship with a bonding company, which we've been bonded for a long time, but our financial strength has really hit over the past 6 years. So I'll answer that question in two ways. If we rewind 10 years, the bonding company is really closely looking at cash. They care a lot about cash, how much cash you have on hand, because they want to take your cash if you don't perform. So that's the very first thing they're going to do. So they want to have cash. They want to know what's going on with your jobs. They want to know how much you have bonded at any point in time, which they're going to know that already. And then they're going to look at your WIP report pretty regularly. But you have to have a WIP report, and you have to have it accurate. So at this point, if we fast forward 10 years to where we are today, they look at pretty much nothing other than if we have a huge project that's maybe a little beyond something we've done in the past. Then they're like, hey, can you get us some internal numbers? Unless they knew the review's ready, then we'll send them the financial review. So that's a really big relationship thing with the bonding company that could be all over the board. If someone is just new to bonding, the financial strength is kind of just barely, their comfort level is just barely there, they're going to ask for more. If you've got a great history with them of performing and they know what you're doing, like here's an example of something they look at that you wouldn't really think about, but me getting into bonding, this makes a lot of sense. early on, they wanted to know if we bid on a project, and let's say it's a $5 million project, and we won the actually we had one like this, so it's $4.5 million, and we were the low bidder by $350,000. And they're like, how are you guys the low bidder by $350,000? Like, what's going on? Like, what are we? Because their brain is like, well, something got missed. What did you guys miss? And so the estimating process is a big deal. So the comfort level there, when they questioned that back then to now, they wouldn't really question. But that's a relationship thing, because early on, they're trying to learn, like, do they actually know how they're estimating? Like, what's their process? Like, they don't know all that stuff, but they learn it through dealing with you. So the estimating, I mean, the whole thing, they look at all that early on. But once the relationship's there, they're really hands off unless there's an issue.
Once you and your bonding company have bonded.
Yes.
There you go. I got James Bond, and I got a second bonding pun here. There we go.
You got it. Once the bonding is complete, you're in good shape.
Yeah, there we go. Wow. They don't even check in on Shayne anymore.
Yeah.
But okay, that sounds like But if we had an off year, I mean, they would say, "Hey, what happened?" I mean, but it's a conversation.
I mean, you mentioned marriage earlier. I mean, this sounds like kind of a reciprocated relationship. Like, they kind of like their best interest is your best interest.
Right.
It's like you've got like an added checks and balance there.
Right.
My question is like, early on developing that relationship, you'd mentioned $350K off on an estimate. How did that happen?
Yeah. So, well, it wasn't necessarily off, but it was off from the next bidder up. So,
right.
Yeah. So it's just, we don't know. I mean, it's public bid. We don't know exactly what they did or didn't bid. We felt good about our bid. The job could have turned out a little better after it's all said and done, but it's one of those where, we're learning, they're learning. And that's where the financial strength comes into play. So if we're 350,000 short on a bid, how much cash do we have on hand? So those are the types of things they're looking at. If you don't have any cash and you're 350,000 short, and they think that maybe you're not going to be able to cover, well, they got a problem. So, but they'll let you make mistakes if you're financially strong, and because they know the history got you to the point to get you to that strength. So you can prove it with your numbers, I guess, is kind of the takeaway. So,
love it.
Cool. Echoing.
No, I think on the financial side, that's where I always like to rope this in, just for the listeners. Like, obviously we're focusing on like tracking project financials. I think this is a really interesting episode, just discussing bonding as heavily as we are. You've mentioned process a lot, and we don't like this to be like a huge plug for Adaptive. It naturally comes up. But Shayne, like, when you were building that relationship when it comes to bonding and really just like ironing out the processes for tight financials, tight tracking, what would you share as like a starting point for the listener that wants to get more into that bonded work, wants to start building a relationship with a bonding agency? What are just some like quick low-hanging fruit opportunities that they can do to make sure they have tight financials to go into that conversation and be successful?
Yeah, so you need a good time tracking software that you feel really good about. You need to have an ability to process basic financial transactions with something like payroll. You're going to need, obviously, being an accountant, but like, you need someone behind you that can help direct and guide that a little bit. Even if it's more of a teaching approach, because with small business, a lot of times it'd be like a teaching approach. You need tools that you can rely on. Adaptive would be a tool you can rely on. We've tested enough that we feel really good about it. So you need consistency with what's being entered, how it's being entered. And because if you don't have consistency, you don't have comparability. Comparability is really important. So something as basic as someone tracking, I don't know, let's say someone puts their subcontractors into one GL account, and then they started using this other account, and it's called something else, and next thing you know, it's like they're looking at their numbers, and it's like, well, this doesn't make sense. How did this account go up 80% year over year? And so it's stuff like that, being consistent with what you're doing. And actually, that's why I do like this history thing. We're on the new. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about this or not, but we're doing the testing on your. How would you say the new release where Adaptive is kind of recognizing the history of the accounts and all that. And I like that because one, it reduces user error potential from picking wrong accounts or wrong cost codes, but it also forces a consistency just over time. So it reduces errors, and over time you're going to have comparable, relevant, useful information, whether it's a job cost report or your financial statement. So I think that's going to be a good tool. So you got to have, I guess, if I were starting a company today, you got to love construction. That's the number one thing. You really got to have a heart for it because it's a hard industry to be in, and you got to have good people, leadership, relational skills. But behind that, if you need a team that can help you support what you're good at. So if you're good at construction, you're not always going to be great at numbers. Some people are, some construction guys are, a lot of times not. We happen to have an owner that is both sides, but that's pretty rare. He's good at the numbers and he's good at because you got to know the estimating process, all that. But if you can get a team behind you, whether it's a good, we talk about bonding, but it'd be the same thing with an accountant, with an attorney, you have the relationships there that let you focus on what you do. Then you can focus on things like taking direction where the accountant says, well, we should start doing this and we should start doing this. Mm-hmm. Once the system's set up, it's like, well, how do I do that? Teach me how to do that. Then, like, you guys have a lot of people on your team that come from the construction industry, so they know the ins and outs of the process flow. And it's like, well, teach me how to do that. It could be the owner's wife. It could be somebody they hire. They understand it well enough to get the financial information consistently tracked. And then from there, an accounting firm can tweak it if someone has to have a compilation or a review engagement done or a full-blown audit. Then it's more of a review correct type thing rather than worrying are the inputs actually correct. Because if I start to second guess inputs, I'm not feeling really good. And it's like,
totally.
What else could be wrong? And then let's dig into that a little bit. So
and I want to highlight like one point. It might seem minor, but I think there's a very tactical comment that you made and a lot of why behind it, which was consistency. It's ambiguous, but what you had actually said in terms of what means consistency, what it actually means is getting the cost into the right account consistently.
Right. Or even in the wrong account consistently, because at least it's comparable. But right. Yeah. You want it to be in the right account ideally. Yeah.
For sure. And you hear that all the time. You hear fluctuation, you hear changing cost codes, you hear people not mapping cost codes to the right accounts, not having a lot of reason to it. And then their data is just all over the place. They're adding stuff here, they're moving stuff there. It's a mess. And I think that's the tactical why.
And that can scare a lot of people, especially business owners, because it's a daunting task on the surface. But if you get the right person that understands and can explain it, or if that's a natural tendency that you as an owner have, great. Because the cool thing about systems and processes is once they're established, they just keep rolling. For the most part, they just keep rolling. You keep them going.
Yeah, no, I like the consistency and comparability comment you made for sure. I know we were talking mostly in this episode about bonding, but that's a great takeaway because we see that. I think that there's both consistency of picking the right code. What we see oftentimes is especially smaller construction companies will get a little excited, I think, when they're setting their cost code list up and have like extreme detail in their cost code list. And then the chances you're going to consistently use those codes over and over are extremely low. And so then there's no comparability. So what are you even doing? You can't use it.
Right. Yep. And that can be very easy to do. I mean, just like right now, we just had a discussion about it earlier today because we have sub-cost codes. So we have all these cost codes that represent a function of work being performed. And then we have subcodes that represent specific GL account. So let's say I'll just pick one of our codes would be, for us, G means excavation type work. And then underneath G, we have our labor, we have our subcontractors, we have our material. So they're all G, so that they all roll up when you're figuring it's all excavation. But it's important that, the mapping is right. So we got to have the sub stuff go to subs. We got to have the material go to material. But then there's complicating things like we own our own equipment. Well, if we own our own equipment, we want to treat it a little bit different than if we rent third-party equipment, because that's important for us to know. So the thing about cost code structure, chart of account structure, and even accountants are probably the most guilty of this, creating a bunch of fancy looking stuff that really maybe isn't super practical for what the owner wants to know. So the discussion with the owner, like, what do you need to know? If you're going to run a successful business, what do you want to know? And that question will help direct like how detailed you need to be or not be. And I agree. You want to start out basic. Once you get a system flowing that is, you get your cost code structure set up, your chart of accounts set up, and it's working, and then you want some more detail, great. You can slowly add in more detail if it makes sense and if it's worth the time that it takes to track it.
Yeah, I agree. That example you just gave, I think, is a good one to kind of wrap this point up around consistency. So if you're say you're trying to compare electrical costs over time and you have Reece, I don't know if it's your audio or whose audio this is, but it's nice and echoey. So say you electrical costs and you have like electrical dash subcontractor, just like your own internal electrical dash material, et cetera. I think your point on having that roll up is extremely important because say you don't have it rolled up and 1 year you work with subcontractors where they buy the materials. And so your electrical dash subcontractor effectively has materials buried in it. And then the next year you're like, I work with subcontractors who install the work, but I buy the materials. So then all the costs move to electrical dash materials. And you're like, oh, look, in 2024, my cost of electrical subcontractors went down a lot. It's like, no, it didn't. Just shifted it to buying the materials directly. If you had it roll up into just an electrical bucket, then it becomes useful because you can say, maybe I did actually spend a little less on electrical in 2024. Why is that? And then you drill down. Oh, I bought materials directly, so I didn't pay the subcontractor margin on that. Okay, that's interesting, right? So I thought that was a good example that we could use to kind of wrap up that topic because your point on rolling it up is a really important one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's really, really a good point. Because when you're digging into numbers, you want to know, you got to understand kind of the story behind what you're looking at. And just because there was a good idea to start tracking something a certain way, it can really throw comparability out the window, which makes it actually does the opposite of what you want it to do. To your point about the materials and who bought the materials, that's a really big deal. And that's where the story comes in. If you can roll it up, it's like, great, okay, we have a total of this. But sometimes even when you roll it up, there's other things that happen that need to be explained. But at least the information's consistent and comparable, which is relevant to what you're looking at. And then you can dig into it a little bit and kind of, do some comparisons and stuff. So yeah, good. That's really good.
Cool. Well, I feel like I learned a lot about bonding on this episode. That was a good little crash course on bonding. We should definitely have you back on, Shayne, to talk through more of the multi-entity stuff. I thought you had great perspective. Really enjoyed the conversation. Love the detail. Love the clarity.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on here.
Totally. No, I appreciate it too. I like the idea of having you back on to do the multi-entity stuff, but likewise, the bond conversation was interesting and even the importance of it. It made me even kind of think about some other episodes that we've done regarding builders with speculative building, right? Yep. Wanting to go in and get financing and the importance of running tight cash. I mean, you really do. You kind of start thinking about how this isn't just top of mind for a lot of builders, right? For the ones that are this is just how I'm doing it. I've been doing it this way. I'm making money. It's fine. It kind of just makes you scratch your head a little bit and say the opportunity just by simplistic processes and starting with your basic project financials and how many doors that opens. So I think this was good.
Yeah. And then making money like that, that's the thing that amazed me most when I got into construction is the amount of business owners that don't really know, are they making money? And it's really kind of scary. And it's just the way they've done it forever. If they got if they got money in the bank account, they're making money. If they don't, they don't. So I think taking it to the next level with some of the tools that you guys are helping provide as well is helpful, especially to the small business owners.
Love it. Cool. Well, we appreciate you hopping on, Shayne. Anything else?
All right. Yeah, I'm just thankful for the opportunity. I'd be happy to come back on if you want to talk about something else.
We'll talk about, I want to get the multi-entity thing down, because I hear quite a few builders, especially the larger ones, they start to dabble. They want to, they're running multiple QuickBooks files for the entities or the projects, and just what you guys are doing over there to keep everything clean and tight and nicely organized. So we'll certainly have you back on, Shayne.
No, I like talking, so yeah, I'll be happy to be on as a guest.
It's that Midwestern in us. Hey, we got 3 Midwesterners here: Michigan, Ohio, Nebraska. Look at that.
There we go.
Rolling deep. Construction accounting. All right, Shayne, we appreciate you. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right.
Yeah.
See ya.